just gonna... I originally wasn't going to mention this here, but I decided after careful consideration I'd rather not be a prick about this, so this review does contain serious spoilers about a game that does have rather severe plot twists and quite a bit of story-centered, however you want to call that. So if you ever want to enjoy this game's story by yourself, please do not watch this review and go play the game for yourself, preferably with cheats. I'll get to that in a while, but let's just move on. Now, admittedly, it was requested this week I do a review of a Breath of Fire game. I was not requested to do a specific one, but I chose to do two for several reasons, okay? One, I personally believe it was the best of the original trilogy, the three of which form a rather solid story arc. Two, I know two better than the rest. I played it quite a bit back on the SNES. Three, it was an easier game to just pick up and play again in preparation to review, as I always do, trying to make sure I have a fresh perspective and I'm not misremembering anything. And four, it had cat in it. Enough said. Now, Breath of Fire 2, as with all games of the series, centers around a young man who inexplicably has blue hair, named Ryu Bateson, or Ryu, depending on how you prefer. He is a poster child for silent protagonist syndrome, spending much of his youth parading around his idyllic and perfect hometown with the intent to spread awareness of his crippling addiction. Unfortunately for him, he also happens to have a hitherto unknown related malady, doomed hometownitis. Sure enough, after one evening of sleeping under the not-quite-dead remains of his massive draconic mother, spoiler alert, he returns to town to find the entire town has been mind-controlled by the evil Arumeru into forgetting you ever existed, and then posing as the local religious leader in order to lure him and the other young boy in town into the church for some nefarious purpose or another. Just like in real life. Spoiler alert. I gotta be honest, I gotta stop here. Anything I say about Breath of Fire 2 is going to be a spoiler, seriously. Anything I say about it all. But this actually does lead into one of the things I have to say about the game. It is very well thought out. There are no real plot holes in the game. They go out of their way to explain, even the little things that didn't actually require explaining, just to make sure it's a very tidy little story, that everything actually fits together and makes a coherent sense. And by little, I mean massive, sprawling, the entire world as you go across it and uncover this global conspiracy to encourage hatred and bloodlust and selfishness and greed and general evil intent within the people of the world in order to fuel their so-called god and have him pour forth from the depths of infinity to kill everything or possibly just have the most massive Tea Party bash ever seen. They're never actually clear on that. It is worth noting that I mentioned briefly earlier, Breath of Fire 2 is a direct sequel to Breath of Fire 1, and 3 is directly impacted by both 1 and 2 as well, though never is in as overt of a way as, for example, Wind Waker is by Ocarina of Time. Instead, there are several hints and subtle touches here and there that give you the impression, with the much larger and distinct points, that the fact that this game happens directly after Breath of 1. For example, Nina's descendant and her falling in love with the first game's Ryu, or whatever, leading to the degradation of the Windian people bloodline, which is why none of the Windians can truly fly. Or the fact that Evan was in fact a combination of experiment and child of Myria, or Tyr, from the first game as sort of a backup plan. And of course Daze is in it because, she's in all of them, being the immortal demi-deity that she is, so, what are you going to do? And little things like that, right? Now, rather than go into specifics about the plot, which I've already covered in a violently spoilerific fashion to such a severe degree that anyone who has not played the game has just had all of the main twists, except for one, spoiled them already, allow me to instead talk about the presentation of the game. Breath of Fire 2 was one of the first games to explore the corrupt religion concept, something Japanese RPGs in general took up and continued as a theme for quite some time, up to the present even. Probably the most well-known of those would be Final Fantasy X. But, many other games did it. Xenogears had a very corrupt religion theme, several things like that. But it is honestly obvious to say why this became such a common theme. Now, I want to stress, I don't mean to say that as some kind of sarcasm or satire. I'm not trying to speak ill of any given religion. However, the concept of religion itself has incredible possibility and temptation for corruption, whether it be a completely normal individual seeking to advance their station or their power or their wealth, or in a fantasy setting, the very real thought that the demons or angels or mutants or aliens or monsters or whatever are real, and have infiltrated something that on the surface is supposed to provide safety and succor, but through their interference can further their ends. It's a compelling concept, you have to admit, right? Mostly because it makes perfect sense. In Breath of Fire 2, this is especially true because they're churchgoers, the people who spread the will of Saint Dova, do so kindly and without rancor. they offer up gold to people and services and help anyone they can. And let's be honest, why not? What exactly does gold mean to their kind, or food, or time, or anything like that? A few years of false kindness to the literal demons of Breath of Fire 2 must seem like trifles that they offer up in exchange for the essence of their being to fuel the end goal. It must seem like a complete bargain to these things. Now, in truth, in any given setting of a fantasy nature like this, it is flat amazing to me that more creatures or people, whether they be abhorrently evil, or power-hungry, or simply selfish, or perhaps possibly just greedy, don't engage in this kind of deception more. Imagine the benefits of being the overlord of the world with none of the detriments. There's no rebel group fighting you. There's no desperate heroes trying to avenge their fallen parents or siblings or whatever. Just a goodly portion of the world's populace willingly following the complete lies you feed them and thanking you for the effort. I mean, good lord. Can you imagine how FF6 would have gone if Geshtal had tried to spread his own religion of magic rather than conquering the world by force of arms? I shudder to think of that. And indeed, we have seen a few games where the religion has conquered the world. I hate to go back to it, but Final Fantasy X. In fact, Final Fantasy Tactics, while I'm on this subject, perfect example. The only reason that got screwed up is the literal demons decided, no, we got other things in mind. In both cases, actually, but moving on. I do have to pause here a moment to remind you, I am not trying to make any political commentary. I am talking as a writer, as someone who enjoys a good story, as a gamer, as someone who wishes to comment on the potential of expansion within existing or newly imagined fantasy settings, whether they be realistic or otherwise. We good? Okay? Brofist? We're cool. Now, one of the reasons I said everything I said way back at the beginning of the review is about being such a spoiler is if you were to pick up Breath of Fire 2 fresh and had no idea what was going on, you probably wouldn't pick up on everything that really was going on until pretty much the end of the game. Did you know that they don't actually reveal the fact that the Church of St. Eva, I've been talking about this whole time, is evil until the third to last dungeon in the game? Literally a point that's within a couple of hours of the last boss, not counting the last dungeon, which, oh god. Oh, and by the way, everything you know is a lie, just letting you know. And it was masterfully done, especially the hints along the way were laid out in a specific manner designed to make you think you know what's going on, but the hints were pointing over here, making you think this is what's going on, and all of a sudden you find out right at the end, oh, by the way, it's actually this over here, you know. And I'm derailing slightly, so forgive me, but the point I'm getting to is Breath of Fire 2 has extremely good pacing to its plot. It goes fast when it needs to, and it kind of lets you pause and sit when you need to, when it wants you to process the thing. It's a game designed to encourage you to think about the plot rather than just letting it happen. And I like that. I do enjoy that. Now, keep in mind, this game came out in 1994, and I think you'll understand why a game with this level of complexity has such a lasting impact on my memory. Before I continue, I have to add there was one other fantastically brilliant touch they added. Back in the 90s especially, games were plagued with idiot translation problems. Whenever they left Japan, they had problems where even Final Fantasy VI had whole segments of dialogue that literally made no sense, that weren't cleared up until the GBA version came out years later with a completely revised, correct script. That being said, they introduced a system in Breath of Fire 2 to counter that. In conversations, you'd see a little gem attached to the conversation window, and at points in the dialogue, it would react based on what the general emotion or feel of what was being said was supposed to be. It could go dark if they were like, "Rrr," or give a little "rrr" sound if they were disappointed, or it would flash brightly and be like, "Wah," if they were a friend and they liked you, that sort of thing. It was a small touch, but it really added to it, because even when the translation wasn't good enough, you knew what was being said. You had a sense for the feeling behind the words, rather than just letters on the screen. There are other good things I can say about Breath of Fire 2, the graphics, the animation, the music, the township, etc. I'm afraid I must come to the reasons. Well, there isn't really one reason, and it is indeed the only reason, but let's get to it. The reason why Breath of Fire 2 is not in one of my top games, is not in the Zero playlist, is not among the best ever. Let's go over some little things first. First of all, the directing did admittedly leave something to be desired. Some scenes would just stop altogether in the middle of the scene and be like, oh, by the way, we're up to the next scene now, with no real sense to it. They would do flashbacks, too. A lot. Like, sometimes they would do a flashback to something that happened 4 minutes ago. In one case, they did a flashback to something that happened 30 seconds ago. It got a little old. In line with this, I like like I said, the game does kind of expect you to pick up on what's going on, and I like that, but some people don't. And with translation issues getting in the way, sometimes the plot get a little too complex, just to the point where it was actually getting confusing rather than complicated. This really comes into play when you realize that while Breath of Fire 2 was a linear RPG, there's only one plot point you can go to. It was not a geographically linear game. And what I mean by that is in most RPGs of that type, when you have to go to the next area, there's no question as to where that is because you just keep going in the direction you were going in, and you will find the next area.